Listen, this was the only ranked matchup of the week, and the stakes could not have been higher for both of these programs. No team, folks, has ever made the college football playoff starting their season 0-1. Florida State certainly passed that litmus test, and now LSU will likely have to run the table in order to get into the last four. Okay, guys, we got to talk about this because, Heather, what does this mean not only for LSU, but Florida State in their pursuit for the playoffs?
Well, let's start with Florida State because they got two things in their pocket that's going to impress the selection committee. A non-conference win against a ranked SEC opponent will resonate through selection day. But they also passed the eye test. Aside from the fouls, the defense, the penalties, the chippiness at some points in time, they looked like a legit team capable of winning the ACC. And come selection day, when you have teams like Michigan who have weak non-conference schedules and you have a similar resume, this win will continue to impress the selection committee. But guys, Florida State has to do something with it. They didn't do anything with it last year. They lost to NC State. They lost to Wake Forest. They lost to Clemson. So they need to continue to win and do this, and they could be amazing in September because they can win at Clemson. We're talking
They play with an edge to me, Dan, when I watched them, and it just looked like old Florida State. It looks, I mean,
I was just going to say, it looks like Florida State's back to me.
Yeah, I was going to say, you look at Travis, he looked like E.J. Manuel to me. I mean, you look like Coleman, he looked like Peter Warwick out there snatching footballs. Give me your thoughts.
It looked like Florida State is back. Florida State was the best team I watched all weekend. And candidly, it wasn't close. This was a dismantling and a dominant performance. And I think the biggest thing that stood out in the game to me was the SEC, and Heather, you know this, it's always, you hear people say, line of scrimmage conference. They got whooped at the line of scrimmage by Florida State, whooped at the line of scrimmage. And the job that Mike Norvell has done in 2021, who's their head coach, in 2021, his team was 5-7.
Right. And
they lost to Jackson State and Wake Forest. Now they just whooped up on the number 5 team in the country last night. So the physical difference between Florida State and LSU was shocking to me, and specifically in the second half. And Jordan Travis, from the second quarter on, and we saw some outrageously good quarterback play this weekend, was as good as anyone.
All right, let's bring in our Tiger expert. All right, RC, Brian Kelly called it a total failure. In your opinion, what happened to LSU last night?
What you got for us, bub?
First off, why in the heck is Dan using words like dismantled, demolish,
you see it again?
Whooped up on? You know what? You would think that someone who is a friend of mine would understand what I'm going through this morning and the way that my Twitter was full of people asking if I would even be here for Get Up. Hell, Julian couldn't find my TVU, and I didn't want to help him. I was hoping to hop on this show in the B's, so I didn't have to talk about this. I mean, when you look at what Florida State was able to do in the second half, to me, it was the physicality in which they played with and which they did dominate LSU, as Dan said. And we think about this team with a guy like Harold Perkins on defense. When you have someone like Jordan Travis on the other side that can use his legs as well as his arm, it kind of neutralized what Perkins was able to do. He wasn't used in the rush. He was used as a Mike backer, as a spy. And so he wasn't a player that could make plays or impact the game. And also, what was glaring to me, I know Dan is talking about the lines of scrimmage. It's on the outside. Listen, LSU is known for having playmakers in the secondary and at the wide receiver position. Florida State was markedly better than LSU was at those positions. And this is in no way to discredit the young man. But when I'm watching LSU and they continue to talk about cornerback play and they keep saying the transfer from Syracuse, that's a problem. Because with all of the talent in Louisiana, with all of the talent in the South, all of the players who grow up dreaming to wear purple and gold, LSU shouldn't have to go to Syracuse for a transfer at that position. And so Brian Kelly is going to have to find a way where we aren't making guarantees the week before the game and then talking about the dismantling after the game. It's about getting your team to play with effort, getting your team to execute in a way that limits mistakes, and then finding a way to be more physical than the other team. And LSU wasn't any of those things last night in Orlando.
Yeah, RC, for me, and I love Brian Kelly, the head coach at LSU. I think the biggest thing that he's got to be concerned about is, all right, we got whooped up front and we looked slow in comparison to Florida State. And that is very rarely, and you know better than me by far, very rarely the case that you could watch a game and sit there and say, we got manhandled at the point of attack and we looked slower on the perimeter than whoever we played, and they're not an SEC team. I think that's the biggest thing that Brian Kelly's got to be concerned about.
Give me your takeaways from what you saw out of that Colorado stunner, because Hunter played both sides of the ball, had, 11 catches, 119 yards receiving, big pick at basically the goal line to cap that game off, and Shedeur threw for 500 yards, 4 TDs.
Travis Hunter is at the top of my Heisman list right now.
Wow.
With all due respect to Caleb Williams, when you see a performance like that on both sides of the ball, making plays that change the game, we haven't seen that in decades, people. Okay, so we'll start there. But the story is the fact that this team is talented and should be taken seriously. And I think that was a big question, was how seriously do you take this team in terms of a competitive? This is fun to watch. He changed this program. This is what Deion Sanders does. You tune in to see the show. Sure. We all watch to see the show, and it exceeded expectations in every shape.
Deion Sanders more than a personality.
Yeah.
I mean, that guy could flat out coach.
Yes.
Just to put it into context, okay? First of all, he's perfect for college football right now. He is so needed in college football. We're talking about personality. We're talking about fun.
Amen.
We're talking about joy,
yes.
the joy of the game, confidence. Bri, you said it. This team was 1-11.
1-11.
Okay, they had 87 new players. My biggest takeaway from the performance: it's 6 penalties. You know how hard that is to get a brand new group of people together. First game of the season, all the noise and conversation. We're going to play on the road against the team that played in the national championship last year.
That's discipline.
And have 6 penalties? Have 6, and it was, you had the 3 best players on the field, and it wasn't even close. Shedeur Sanders was absolutely surgical. Hunter looked like Charles Woodson and Chris Gamble, throwback to Chris Gamble at Ohio State. And Dylan Edwards was the fastest player on the field. That happened in 6 months. That's unbelievable, the job that and it wasn't just this acquisition of talent. They were so well coached and disciplined that I do not feel this was a flash in the pan 1 week performance. I don't. I feel like this team is a very good college football team.
Yeah, but can I just say, that being said, and I don't want to be Debbie Downer here, but I'm gonna sprinkle a little bit of dose of reality on this. This wasn't the Super Bowl, okay? Just to keep it into perspective, TCU was picked to finish 5th in the Big 12.
Sure.
We don't know what they're gonna look like. Max Duggan was nowhere on the field because he's long gone. They've got a long road ahead of them in the Pac-12,
sure,
which was outstanding this week.
My only pushback to that is this. They play Oregon and USC at the end of this, September. The players in the locker room, since Deion has kind of taken them in, have heard, do it this way. You do it this way, you'll get this result. You do it this way. And as a player, and RC can kind of speak to this as well, you believe it, but there's always like a fragment of doubt.
Yes.
We'll really see.
They believe now.
Exactly.
They believe
and
now.
This is when you're like, uh-oh,
yeah.
Now it really can get turned up.
Yeah, you're right about that. RC, give me a capper on this.
Well, the thing is this. You listen to Heather talk about the fact that they'll face USC, they'll face Oregon. We have to remember that this is a 1-11 team last year who went into TCU, and we don't know what TCU will be. Preseason rankings are just that, people ranking teams based on what we believe they could be because of what their roster looks like. But this team goes into TCU and wins. And it doesn't just win, it wins in impressive fashion. It wins with the 3 best players on the field. And that's what Deion Sanders has done to the Colorado Buffaloes. He's raised expectations so high, we've forgotten how terrible they were last year. And what he's shown, along with Texas State going in and beating Baylor, is that you can recreate a team in 6 months. You can recreate a team in a year. But none of this happens without Jackson State. None of this happens without Deion Sanders getting an opportunity to run a college program, getting an opportunity to understand the business, be able to delegate, be able to recruit and hire good men and women around him. Let's think about Sean Lewis. A guy that was a head coach at Kent State decides to go be the offensive coordinator at Colorado because he knows that the amount of eyes and the amount of attention that will be on him now under Deion Sanders is more than he could have ever asked for at Kent State. So week 1 at TCU with people watching, most of them because they want to see you fail. This team exceeds expectations and immediately becomes the most exciting team in college football. If they win 5 games, if they win 6 games, if they win 7 games, for anybody else, we would say that's enough. But what's going to be more important about this team is you're going to have a team that's talked about every week, that's coached well, that's disciplined, and that competes. And those aren't things that people were trying to give Deion Sanders. So let's give credit to Jackson State, to Deion Sanders and Shedeur Sanders. They proved that if you grow and if you do it the right way, it shows up big time on Saturdays. And that's what happened for Colorado and Deion Sanders-led team.
Florida State, on the other hand, Florida State has a lot in its back pocket right now because they got 2 things. They got a win against a ranked SEC opponent, and they also passed the eye test. The selection committee watches how games unfold. They're not asking you to run up the score, but this was a convincing win, and that matters. Now they have to do something with it because last year, Florida State didn't do anything with it. They lost to NC State. They lost to Wake Forest. They lost to Clemson, and they fell out of the picture. This year, they look better. They look capable of doing something with it. That's the difference. And if they go on the road and they beat Clemson in Death Valley on September 23rd later this month, we are talking about Florida State and the college football playoff because the selection committee will be too.
What stood out to you, Dan, when you watched Florida State? I was watching, I'm like, man, is this Charlie Ward and Peter Warwick out here playing pitch and catch?
Florida State was the best team that I watched from this past weekend in all of college football, and it did look like Florida State is back. I think the thing is the speed and the physicality that stood out. You know, they whooped an SEC team, a very good SEC team in LSU, at the line of scrimmage. And they made that SEC team look slow on every facet or in every facet of the game. The perimeter, the quarterback play. And this was, from the second quarter on, a flawless performance by their quarterback, Jordan Travis. And this was a destructive performance by Florida State. You're talking about Mike Norvell. In 2021, Florida State was 5-7. 5-7. They lost to Wake and Jackson State. I remember calling the game in 2021 being like, they don't look anything like Florida State of old.
Right.
You want to watch last night, Johnny Wilson on the outside, Keon Coleman on the outside, Benson at back, Bell. Like, they got players. Jared Verse is one of the best edge rushers in all of college football and is likely a top 10, top 15 NFL pick. So I think, to Heather's point, this team beats Clemson, Florida State's going to college football playoff. And as, we watch Clemson tonight. They're on our network. We'll see what they look like. I expect Florida State to beat Clemson in 3 weeks when they play. Watching the way they played last night, if not for drops, they would have hung 50 on LSU.
Wow. That's interesting. Listen, they played really well, but without question, the story. Wait, go ahead, RC. What do you got?
No, man, like, I don't know what's wrong with Heather and Dan. Like, they just keep pouring it on. They could have scored 50. They can't get to the national championship. I get it, y'all. We get it. We didn't play well. Thank you. On to Colorado.
Oh, no. We had to be on here when y'all won the national title in 19. I had to be on with you the next morning. We had to be on you when last year the basketball team for the girls won. We had to be on here when the boys won the baseball championship. Now we get one game where y'all get whooped. Let's have some fun. Let's have some fun, RC.
Thank you for watching ESPN on YouTube. For live streaming sports and premium content, subscribe to ESPN+.